can actually play Battlefield 1. What will we think of it, Matt Bertz?
I like it a lot. You know, I should preface this. I'm a Battlefield guy. Since 1942, I've really enjoyed the squad-based kind of open world Airland Sea combat.
2142, you're a big fan of?
2142 is pretty low on my list, personally.
All right.
I'm not a mech guy, really. Titanfall is like the only game that has mechs that
Well, those aren't mechs, technically. Legally, they're not mechs.
Legally, they are not mechs. Yeah. Such a weird thing to talk around.
It's nonsense. But where does this stand out?
This game, I think it's a refreshing change of pace for competitive multiplayer because so much has been modern focused and now like everybody's in the space race. Call of Duty's there, Titanfall's there, Gears of War's been there, Halo's been there. It's really nice to have something kind of go analog instead of go digital, And this is really analog. It's
horses.
There's
as
horses,
analog as it gets.
Yeah, there's cavalry, there's biplanes that are really slow. These giant slow tanks. Bolt action rifles make up the majority of the arsenal. There are SMGs as well.
I feel like with the tech and the weapons in this game, from what I've seen so far, it's really just a tech freak show. It's like maybe it's just in the campaign they focus more on it, but like, hey, check out this wacky design for a gun. Look at this weirdo tank. It's just
they're
like
super weird looking.
It's bizarre.
But that's what it was like back then.
I'm sure, but I think there's a little bit of like this weird looking automatic weapon. Let's give it to you because it's structured so bizarrely.
I saw a GIF of a guy kneeling on the head of a horse with a flamethrower, shooting it from the front, and the guy in the back with a flamethrower. So it's like flame shooting off this horse. Mm-hmm. I was like,
awesome.
I got to play this game.
Talk about the refreshing nature of going back in time again. I didn't really think about it until I booted it up last night. And then just realized, God, it's so nice to hear a good orchestral version of the Battlefield theme again.
It's one of the best themes of all time.
It's so good. Instead of just
timeless.
It's better than that farty, blown out speaker.
Yeah, the Skrillex version that we had.
Exactly, for so long. So is it just the setting that you're really in love with here?
I like the setting, and I really like one of the new modes that it's called Operations. It's kind of a blend of their two best modes for me, Conquest and Rush.
Okay.
It's got like the capture recapture nature of a Conquest mode, but it's like Rush in that there's only usually two at one time, so it really focuses the front line. So you get those crazy battlefield moments where like there's 64 people, 32 people are trying to get into this one bunker and 32 people are trying to keep them out of the bunker, and there's just tear gas or mustard gas grenades, and there's flamethrowers, and there's just these epic moments that feel really tense, and it kind of hits on the brutality of this game too. This is a weird thing to say about a war game. This is the most violent Battlefield game that there's been
because World of War-esque.
It's way more up close and personal. And there's a lot of melee kills that are just brutal with like knives and bayonet charges and like these guttural screams of agony when someone's lit on fire. And in the operations mode, when you capture a control point and you move forward, like everybody is charging to the next one and everyone's screaming like, oh!
Because of the bayonet charge, or just
no,
automatic?
It's just like automatic.
We're
we're charging to the next spot to try to take it, and it's really tense. I know people hate this word, but it's visceral. Like it's really.
I think they made the last one actually. Yeah.
They did.
It's so bizarre. I've been playing a lot of Overwatch with like the Halloween edition and the Halloween nonsense event, I guess, that they have going on now. And it's so strange for me to go from that multiplayer to Battlefield 1's multiplayer, where I feel like with Overwatch, like I can fill out a full team with friends. I feel like there's big swings. I'm having a real impact. And then going to Battlefield 1's multiplayer, which is just huge. I feel very much like a soldier in World War I, where it's like, well, I'm probably going to die here, and I don't think I'm really going to have an impact on anything. But you feel like that massive group just creates such a different dynamic that it really stands out.
Nothing else is really playing at that scale, and I think that's the big differentiation factor of the game. It really captures something that the other games aren't focused on. A lot of the other ones are really focused on like small infantry-based opportunities to, just go head-to-head with like 10 to 12 other people. Like this is way bigger, and you got the vehicles involved as well, and that's always been refreshing to me. It gives it a different flavor.
Yeah, so you mentioned like the bolt action rifle. I think when this game was first announced, people were worried about the speed of combat, whether or not everything's going to be slow and clunky and tanks are going to barely work like they did back in the day. But does everything still feel modern enough?
Tanks work.
Okay.
If you get into a tank and you stay at distance, you can just shell a flag and just rack up the body counts, because most of the weapons against tanks are kind of like dynamite and anti-tank grenades. And if you keep people at a distance where they can't chuck those at you, you can clean up with body counts. But I think DICE was smart about trying to counter that. So almost every class has something that they can use against a tank because they are powerful. Mm-hmm. You know, in Battlefield 4, the threat is the jets up above, the choppers, you know, like all that stuff raining hell from above. That's not really a factor here. There are bombers and there are biplanes like Red Baron style, but you can shoot those down with guns. You know, like they are made of balsa wood, basically. so it focuses it more on one plane instead of always having to deal. Like ace pilots, don't get me wrong, they can still wreak havoc on a battlefield, but it's easier to take them out.
Yeah. So just jumping in and playing a little bit, I was having a real tough time, and then I came across the beloved Scout class. And maybe it's just like the early days of Battlefield, so everyone's still learning the maps and running around like crazy. But I found like if I just lie down in this street with a sniper rifle, I can just annihilate.
I'm not playing with you.
Well, he's a lone wolf. He's one of those.
Yeah. Are the snipers frustrating in this game? I feel like it's always been
they can be, you know, like any Battlefield game, they can be. But one of the things I really love about Battlefield 1 is the weather will change the dynamics of the tactics available to teams. So if fog rolls in, if a sandstorm starts, you're worthless as a sniper. You can't do shit.
The fog looks so cool. By the way.
It really changes it, and you really need to get up close and personal with the objectives.
JV, did you play multiplayer yet?
Oh yeah, I played a little bit of it. I mostly played it at a preview event though, but I played a couple of rounds last night, and I still think my favorite thing about Battlefield 1 is it's the first game from DICE that I've played where I really am taken in by the destructibility of everything.
Yeah. It's back.
Like cowering in a house and gunfire is tearing it to pieces. A tank just blew like half of the living room to shreds. That's amazing.
It hasn't been this destructible since Bad Company 2, which to me is still the high watermark for Battlefield. You know, that in Battlefield 2.
It's also a little silly though. Like you'll see a horse go ripping around a corner and just destroy a bunch of boxes as it goes running through it, and you're like, all right, cool.
Horse busting through a house wall.
It's like a wrecking ball.
But it's super impressive to me in particular because I'm usually not someone who's taken in by like bells and whistles stuff for a long period of time, but like it is sustained in Battlefield. Like I am constantly looking around at things just being shredded.
Yeah, and
it's great. And
ups the intensity, like you said. Like you think you're safe in a building, and that thing can be torn down very quickly.
Yeah. You feel like this multiplayer is going to have legs? Or do you think it's going to catch on?
Battlefield has an entrenched community, and it's going to do well regardless. But I do, at least for someone like me who's been with the series since the beginning, it's really refreshing.
Yeah, and it sets itself, like you said earlier, it sets itself apart from all the other FPS games that are doing the space race right now. Like it is something that is unique and stands out, kind of like Overwatch does, I would argue.
The big question I have is a lot of people were burned by Battlefront, Star Wars Battlefront. What lessons did they learn from that, like in terms of the content they're offering? What's like in that box on day one?
It's an apples to oranges comparison. This is a legit Battlefield.
The lesson they learned is don't work with LucasArts.
But I mean, they don't have the thing that everybody was pissed off with Battlefront, where it's like, oh, you don't really get to climb into an X-wing on your own. You just get a little X-wing icon that you can spawn in next time around. And this time it's like, nope, here's some weird ass tanks. Climb on this horse, classic Battlefield style.
If anything, I think the test run with the Frostbite technology that they're able to use with the photogrammetry and stuff like that with Battlefront has translated really well into this game. It's gorgeous.
But it has a lot of maps at launch. I know you were looking through menus and there was things that just said like coming soon, entire modes that were kind of locked off.
There's 10 maps at start.
That's great.
And all the usual suspects are there that you'd expect. Conquest is there, Rush is there, the new operations mode's there, team deathmatch, domination. So there's a lot to choose from. There's this custom games mode where they place like hardcore, and there's a new mode that we played at the review event called Fog of War, which is basically pistols in a forest. You know, kind of, they're going to do some one-off stuff to keep the content fresh over the course of the life of the game. That's not activated yet. I'm not sure. I asked EA if it's going to be live for Friday or what, because I'd like to test that before I lay my final review score down.
Right.
But there's a lot there, and the campaign's bigger.
Yeah, I mean, there's a campaign, for Christ's sake.
What is that?
And the opening to the campaign is so cool.
It really is.
Why don't you lay it out for us? Bertz?
So basically, if you know anything about World War I, like 60 million people fought in this war, and most of the bodies were just thrown at fronts, you know, with like total disregard for the lives of the soldiers. Like, we just need to take the spot.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do it. So like most of the people on those front lines were cannon fodder, and they died quickly and horrifically. That first mission recreates that. Basically, it tells you right before you start, you're not meant to live through this.
It's a nice heads up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like you start the mission and, the first time I played it, I was like, okay, I'm dead. I guess I'll restart at the checkpoint. Nope. They just morph you into another body and you're another soldier and you need to push forward. And after each guy dies, they give you like, you're born, you're died, and they keep doing that.
It's basically, to me, felt like they repurposed the ending of Halo Reach in an interesting way.
Kind of,
Yeah,
yeah.
like that's what I was thinking about. Like, oh, I'm out of guns. I guess like I can still fight them off, but nope, dead.
Yeah.
So dead.
The second time I played through it, I was like, I'm going to be really careful. I'm going to be smarter than this dumb AI. But you run out of bullets and you're screwed.
And they surround you. Like there
Yeah.
are just like crowds of them at some point.
Yeah, it's strange to play that opening and be like, this is really strong for the opening of a Battlefield campaign, and then continuing further into the campaign, which is structured very strangely.
It's
but
short stories, basically.
Yeah,
But that's
exactly.
so
You can choose
cool.
what you want to do, but I'm really into it. I think I'm going to play
Yeah.
this entire Battlefield campaign, which is something I haven't said for a very, very long time.
See, I think I made a bad choice coming off that tutorial mission because I loaded one up where you're playing in Italy.
Yeah,
And you're wearing
okay.
like a suit of armor and like that's cool.
It's a fun premise, and like you see in the opening cutscene when he's like putting on this like old.
It's straight up like medieval knights sort of
yes,
stuff.
Thank you.
But like I'm playing through it right now, and hopefully the other levels are different. But it just feels sort of like, well, this is Call of Duty. There's some Call of Duty right now going on.
I think that one stands out as something very different. I finished the pilots. I started like the tank one, and then I also am like halfway through that Italy one, which I think the visuals look amazing. The setting
Incredible.
is fantastic, but then it is just mow guys down as a tank, and I think it's something that feels very different from the other ones that I've played.
Well, that's good because
Well, they're all different. Yeah.
yeah. I'm looking forward to the variety, but I am like fascinated just conceptually by the idea of a campaign that's vignettes,
Yeah,
that's short
and
stories.
It's interesting. Tonally, they're all over the place. There's the very somber opening mission. The pilot mission is more of like a Han Solo, like guy who just steals a plane and then he's in the war and he loves it. It's for the thrills.
it's pretty
you know,
over the
like-
top, but within reason, within the context and how they're telling that story.
Mhm.
But like,
And
who doesn't love a fun
but
story?
that might make sense too. Like if you think about it, like someone who's not on the ground seeing that sort of stuff. Granted, I haven't played that mission though.
It's more over the top than you think, but they
Okay.
justify why it might
Okay.
be. Yeah.
Interesting.
But it's like all the missions also serve as like an onboarding for these are the very different things that you can do in a Battlefield multiplayer match.
Yeah.
Like the guy in the crazy suit of armor with the machine gun. That's one of the new elite classes. One of the things they borrowed from Battlefront.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's not like, don't think of it as multiplayer maps with like, here's a story slapped on. Like, it's surprisingly customized. I know they haven't.
But they are the multiplayer maps.
Oh, are they really?
Oh yeah.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
So-
I haven't played enough multiplayer to see
So
that.
that's, I don't know. I think my big concern then is like, okay, this structure is cool, but I'm going to get to the end of the campaign and feel like, well, this is another tacked on tutorial. That,
Well, it's more shaped than that. They give it more bones narratively, so it doesn't feel necessarily like that.
yeah, that's what I'm hoping. But because like Battlefield 4 and even like what is it, Hardline? I want to say Frontline for some reason, probably because we're talking about World War One. But like even Hardline's weird police story mode felt like a
They were
tutorial.
horrible.
They were really bad, really weird, and really bad.
This is much better than those, I think.
Okay.
The one thing I kind of wished they did more of, from what I can tell, most of these characters are completely made up. How many millions of not awesome, but harrowing and crazy stories of triumph and failure are there from World War One that none of us know?
But how
you know,
many of those
like-
stories involve being in a suit of armor marching up a mountain?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? I don't know. Which is the best one? Best storyline to play through?
I think probably the Lawrence of Arabia one was my favorite because it's the last mission of that one's more open, like a micro sandbox that you might play in a crisis.
Okay.
Where there's multiple objectives and you get to determine, am I going to go stealth? Am I going to go steal a tank and just roll through these places? Like it gives you those options that I think have always meant to be in a Battlefield game.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ben, what's that Great War podcast you listen to?
Oh, Dan Carlin's Hardcore History?
Yeah. My roommate listens to that too, and he was listening to it while I was playing through the game, and I was like, "This is really cool."
Yeah, we talked about it on this podcast before, but I finished that off. It's like over 20 hours of World War I history, and I still think it's an awesome primer to now play the game based on that. Maybe that's why I'm more into the campaign than multiplayer so so far, just to have somewhat of that story element there.
Also, you suck at multiplayer.
That's
by laying down
very-
in a street.
It's very, very true.
You know what? So many people do that in this game. I don't know what it is. If
What are they doing?
They're laying down. You run in front of a guy and you expect him to go behind cover or just come at you and shoot you. They lay down. And I'm like, what are you doing?
I mean, it supposedly works with a bear. If you see a bear, maybe that's where they learned all their multiplayer skills from.
It's really weird. It's happened to me multiple times to the point where I started remarking, like, okay, have you guys seen this? So my squad mates are like, yeah, people are doing that.
Has it been a while since you can go prone in a Battlefield game?
No.
Okay. Didn't they take that out at some point and the fans
Yeah,
were outraged?
it was out for Bad Company 2, I believe,
Yeah.
and they put it back
Okay.
in for 3.
Is that what it was? Okay, got it.
They had to figure out how to make snipers still...
Fair.
No, yeah, like how can you spot a sniper? They came up with the scope glint,
Right.
you know,
Yeah, that's
and I
also a
think
good
that's
solution.
why when Prone went back in.
Okay. Yeah, but that campaign, like, there's just standout moments, like in the tank one, just being, you talk about the fog, Reiner, just being in like the foggy woods at night, trying to find these Germans, just hear scared Germans shouting through the fog in the woods in the middle of the night. It's like, I am super into this.
And
This
their
is my
sound
thing.
is great. You know,
Yeah.
the guy we interviewed for what was it, Battlefield 3, Stefan Stramberg.
Yeah.
He's one of the game directors now, I believe,
Oh,
on that
awesome.
project. And that sound quality carries through to almost everything except one major pet peeve of mine.
What's that?
So location-based sound is so key in a shooter, right? You need to be able to hear when someone's in the same
Right.
building as you, when there's a cavalry horse charging at your position. None of that is happening for me in multiplayer. I can hear my teammates' footsteps, but I cannot hear other people come into the room with me.
Weird.
That's wow.
That's a problem.
Maybe
Yeah.
they address it at some point. Hopefully,
Yeah,
like in an update.
I hope so,
Yeah.
because it seems like they have those two tuning things reversed. You
But-
know, it should be.
Yeah, which is the way Overwatch does it.
But
yeah.
like hopping back to like what you're talking about with like scared Germans and whatnot, one of
Yeah.
the things I've noticed, and I'm bringing this up because I've noticed it in Mafia too, where like video game developers are sort of like doing more things with like enemy animations and shooting games than just sort of ragdoll stuff now. Like, in the opening level of Battlefield 1, there's one part where you're in a tank and you're rolling by and you'll see like enemy Germans like scooting away from you before the tank like rolls over them.
yeah.
And then in Mafia, which I guess we're talking about later,
Yeah.
like whenever like they have like really disturbing sort of like death rattles and animations where they're lying on the ground like begging for their mother and stuff. And it's just interesting and kind of horrifying that like we're getting to that point with that sort of detail.
You think it's just these two specific games? Or you think the industry is interested in more sympathetic?
I have no
Fodder.
idea. I'm interested in sympathetic fodder. That's
Yeah.
a great like band name or something or an album name. But like, have you guys noticed that? Like, is that a thing that stuck out to you, or is it?
It's a thing that definitely sticks out to me with Battlefield. Yeah, I mean, the death animations
they are brutal.
they're tough to watch sometimes, and they really raise your pulse.
Yeah, I remember playing it at the preview event back at E3, I think, and just sort of like pushing myself away from the screen. And I don't get squeamish during games. I was like, wow, this is really intense.
Yeah. So overall, you're impressed by the campaign.
I think it's one of their better ones. I don't think it stands up with the best shooter campaigns or anything like that, but
Okay.
it's a decent campaign.
Yeah. Do you think it's a good structure to carry forward? Going back to Reiner's point again about maybe a future Battlefront game, do you think like this kind of vignette style would work for that? Is it a good future for overall
I
Battlefield?
like short stories personally, whether they're executed in game or, novel format, literature format, but
I agree with you on that. But that said, if you ever have a chance to make a new Star Wars story, go for it. Don't just tell these little short stories. Like, really, go for it.
I think I'd want the vignettes.
I
I think there's enough Star Wars content to tell cool stories about. Why not?
I love those old Tales of Jabba's Palace books and stuff like that, but I don't see that transitioning in a way where you're going to have really interesting characters in short battlefield moments or battlefront moments. Whereas I would want to play as... Maybe you are jumping to different characters, but I would want that in one big, huge story.
one galactic war.
Exactly.
Okay. I can see it. JV, what do you want?
I want more vignettes just to see like, okay, let's see where they can take this. Not necessarily even in like a Battlefront, Battlefield, EA sort of sense, but just, and more stuff. Like,
Yeah.
I just want to see that form sort of take off and see where developers can take it.
What are those dumb bat things in Empire Strikes Back?
The what?
The bat
The
things?
bad things.
Oh, like from the asteroid
Wombats?
field?
Yeah. What are they called? Come on.
Come
Come on, Star Wars nerd.
Wow, have we stumped Reiner?
Not
No, no, no,
Murloc. Something like that.
Minox.
Minox.
Mine.
Yeah.
I hope that if they continue with the vignette style for Battlefront 2,
You
that
play a
can,
Minox.
you can fly as a Minox, just like in this, you fly as the carrier pigeon
That's
over the
so dumb.
battlefield.
Is
They
the
wanted it to be so beautiful, and it does not quite get
Is
there.
the end game just sticking your mouth on like the Millennium Falcon, and
They're
that's
just
it?
harassing.
Credits?
Because
Leia.
dun, 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 dun. Yeah.
Special
I
thanks,
would play
George
that.
Lucas.
So, best Battlefield since, what would you say, Bertz?
Out the gate, I mean, it's stronger than 4 and 3 out the gate. But,
Okay.
you know, those games got really good as they progressed.
Oh, yeah.
As, you know, you added maps. I still wish they wouldn't split the player base, you know, with the map expansions. You know, like fragmenting your user base is a bad idea.
Yeah.
But, I mean, it's a really good game. It's going to be a 9+. I already know that. I'm not quite there yet with, you know, I need more time. You know,
Yeah.
the longer you play multiplayer games, the more their nuances reveal themselves to you. So,
Yeah,
making sure I do it right. But it's good.